Hello and welcome to Pitboards and Podiums with me, Maya Westwick. In today's episode, we are going to be doing the track guide for the 2024 Australian Grand Prix, so buckle up and let's talk F1. Alright guys, as I said, today is everything that you're going to need to know ahead of the Australian Grand Prix this year. So I'm going to get straight in, starting with the timings for this weekend. So obviously being in Australia, so for myself that is on the other side of the world, you know, being from the UK, the timings are going to be a little bit fun, and we're going to have to get up quite early or stay up quite late, depending on what you want to do if you want to be able to watch things. So on Friday, FP1 is at 12:30 p.m. local time, which is 1:30 a.m. here in the UK. FP2 is at 4 p.m. local time, which is 5 a.m. here on Friday morning. On Saturday, FP3 is at 12:30 p.m. so again 1:30 a.m. here in the UK. Qualifying is at 4 p.m. local time, so 5 a.m. here in the UK. And on Sunday, the race starts at 3 p.m. local time in Melbourne, which is of course 4 a.m. here in the UK on Sunday morning. So it's going to be a weekend of very early starts for us, but that is okay. Some stats about the circuit itself and the Grand Prix itself. It is a 58 lap race around a 3.28 mile circuit. That means that the circuit is 5.278 kilometres long. There are 14 turns, 9 to the right, 5 to the left, and 4 DRS zones to promote overtaking. The race distance is 190.216 miles or 306.124 kilometres, and the first F1 race held at Albert Park was held in 1996. Previously, there had been races in Adelaide from 1985, and then in 1996 it moved to Melbourne. The record for the most poles around Albert Park was set by Sir Lewis Hamilton, and that is 8 poles, and the record for most wins is held by Michael Schumacher with 4. The race lap record is 1 minute 20.235 seconds. That was set by Sergio Perez last year. And the qualifying lap record is 1 minute 16.732 seconds, set by Max Verstappen in Q3 of qualifying last year, again 2023. Pole position is situated on the left-hand side of the track, which is the outside going down to turn 1, and the start line to turn 1 braking point is 271 metres. The maximum speed is 326.2 kilometres per hour or 202.6 miles per hour, and you can expect an average pit stop loss of about 19.5 seconds. The tyre compounds available to the teams this year are the C3, C4 and C5 tyres, so the 3 softest tyres in the Pirelli range, with the C3 being the hard, C4 being the medium and C5 being the soft this week. That is 1 step softer than last year, so potentially that might impact pit strategy. Typically, you'd expect it to be a one-stop strategy unless something went wrong or unless there was a safety car particularly early on or late on into the race. But with the tyres being softer this year, potentially that will force some teams that suffer more with degradation into 2-stop strategies. So that'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And there is also a very high likelihood of some sort of safety car or virtual safety car intervention. So at some point this weekend, expect for there to not be green flag running, basically. And the last little bit of info about the circuit and about the Australian Grand Prix. At the moment, the Grand Prix is under contract until 2035 to be racing in Albert Park in Melbourne. Now, following on from the last race in Saudi Arabia a couple of weeks ago, obviously Oliver Bearman stepped in for Carlos Sainz and drove for Ferrari that weekend, with Sainz having surgery for appendicitis. Bearman will be in Australia again this week, just in case. He will be on standby to compete for Ferrari if Sainz has not recovered enough, but their plan A, we know what Ferrari are like with their plans, but their plan A is that Carlos Sainz will be competing this weekend. Of course, if he gets through a couple of practice sessions and maybe realises that he's not fit to compete, then Oliver Bearman will step in. But it is worth noting as well, if Sainz had already completed qualifying, Bearman will not be allowed to step in for him just wherever Sainz qualified, like whatever position that was. That's not how it works. So if between qualifying and the race, Sainz decided he's not well enough to compete, Ferrari are only running 1 car this weekend. Some information about the 2023 race, just for a bit of context from last year. So I'll give you a little rundown of the finishing order. It was quite eventful. I'm not going to go into it all, but we did have 8 DNFs. And then I'll talk about the qualifying order as well and all of that. So Max Verstappen won last year's race with a race time of 2 hours, 32 minutes and 38.371 seconds. Lewis Hamilton finished in P2, 0.179 seconds behind. Alonso in P3, 0.769 seconds behind. Stroll in P4, 3 seconds behind. Perez in P5, 3.3 seconds behind. It's also worth noting that Perez set the fastest lap, which was the 1 minute 20.235 that I mentioned earlier, which is of course the race lap record for the circuit. Lando Norris in P6, 3.7 seconds behind. Hülkenberg P7, 4.9 seconds behind. Piastri P8, 5.3 seconds behind. Zhou 5.7 seconds behind. Tsunoda P10, 6 seconds behind. Bottas P11, 6.5 seconds behind. And Sainz P12, 6.5 seconds behind as well. So those are the only finishes of the race last year. As you can kind of tell from that, there was incidents going on throughout the race, and also there was incidents quite late into the race. That is why the race literally finished with a 6-second gap between the winner and the last finisher. So it was quite dramatic, and obviously that was also the race where Sainz got his penalty for contact with Alonso, that Alonso himself as well as Sainz both kind of question. So it was one of many questionable stewarding decisions that we had last year, but we always have them. There's always going to be things that people disagree with. The drivers that didn't finish last year were Gasly, Ocon, De Vries, Sargent, Magnussen, Russell, Albon and Leclerc. Leclerc crashed out on lap 1. It was not fab, but it's what happened. It was eventful. It really was. The qualifying order for the race last year, we had Max Verstappen on pole. He set a pole time of 1 minute 16.732, which again, as I mentioned earlier, is the qualifying lap record. So both last year's pole time and last year's fastest lap time are the official records for the circuit. And then we had George Russell starting from P2, Hamilton P3, Alonso P4, Sainz P5, Stroll P6, Leclerc P7, Albon P8, Gasly P9, Hülkenberg P10, Ocon P11, Tsunoda P12, Norris P13, Magnussen P14, De Vries P15, Piastri P16, Zhou P17 and Sargent P18. Perez and Bottas both had to start from the pit lane after their cars were worked on under part firme conditions, and also Perez failed to set a qualifying time at all because he crashed in Q1 of qualifying last year, so he was only allowed to race at the steward's discretion. Now, just a few bits kind of that have happened going into this weekend, because obviously there's always some sort of context behind the scenes that is going to potentially be playing in the background over a race weekend. So at the moment there are a couple of things actually. So the first thing that I'm going to talk about is Susie Wolff. Now you might remember in December last year, Susie Wolff was investigated by the FIA after a magazine had made some completely baseless claims against her, basically claiming that she and Toto Wolff were like sharing information, that it was a conflict of interest and all this. And of course, there was no evidence for that. There was no reason for any of that other than pure misogyny. And the FIA obviously received a lot of stick for that, for starting that investigation. That's kind of reared its head again recently with everything that's gone on with Christian Horner and how they've refused to investigate that, even though there have been official formal complaints made to them and there is a plethora of evidence. When they were so quick to investigate Susie Wolff over baseless accusations with no evidence. But regardless, it has been confirmed. Susie Wolff herself announced that she has filed a complaint in French courts against the FIA. She's filed a criminal complaint against them after they launched and then dropped this investigation in December over this whole alleged breach of confidentiality. So she's released this statement online confirming that she has filed a criminal complaint to the French court. She did that on the 4th of March, and that was in relation to these accusations. She says that there has still not been any transparency or accountability in relation to the conduct of the FIA and its personnel in this matter. I feel more than ever it's important to stand up, call out improper behaviour and make sure people are held to account. Whilst some may think silence absolves them from responsibility, it does not. So I'm not going to speak for her. I'm not in her mind. I don't know why she's chosen to do this, when she's chosen to do it, but the timing of it and that last bit about how holding people to account and silence absolving people from responsibility, the timing of it could be that, you know, it's related to the lack of investigation into Christian Horner and the way that Mohammed bin Sulayem has been so publicly backing him, especially since, of course, the woman who came out and made those accusations against Christian Horner has since lost her job, and he's still just hanging about the paddock like nothing's happened. Lewis Hamilton has very publicly backed Susie Wolff and said how incredibly proud he is of her. He said, "I think she's so brave and she stands for such great values. She's such a leader, and in a world where people are often silenced, for her to be standing up sends such a great message. And I love that she's taken it out of this world, out of the world of Formula One, fighting it from outside, because there is a real lack of accountability here within this sport, within the FIA, things that are happening behind closed doors. There is no transparency, there is clearly no accountability, and we need that. I think the fans need that. How can you trust the sport and what is happening here if you don't have that?" So hopefully this stand that she's taken now will create change, will have a positive impact, and especially for women. Lewis also said about how the sport is so male dominated, and he also said, "And we're living in a time where the message is if you file a complaint, you'll be fired, and that is a terrible narrative to be projecting into the world, especially when we're talking about inclusivity here in the sport. We need to make sure that we're staying true to the core values here." So he himself is very much referencing what has gone on with Red Bull, the way that she so bravely came forward against Christian Horner, against the CEO of Red Bull Racing, and then she's the one who's lost her job. She was suspended on full pay. He's had no repercussions, and she's got all this unnecessary spotlight on her that she never asked for and she didn't want. It's also worth noting as well that since the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, she has lodged a formal appeal against the decision to suspend her, because of course, why should she lose her job? She's not done anything to lose her job over. She's been suspended for daring to come forward against someone. So like Lewis says, if you file a complaint, you'll be fired. That's the message that's going out at the minute, which of course does not make the sport feel very safe for women, because what sort of world is that? That if you're being harassed at work, you try and do something about it and you're the one that loses your job. It's not good enough, is it? George Russell also echoed the same sentiment, basically saying that issues in the sport shouldn't just be swept under the carpet, and that he thinks that as drivers, they trust that the leaders in the sport have the best interests of the sport and of the teams individually at their hearts rather than their own best interests. So that is something that is going to have to change in terms of the way that everything is kind of moving behind the scenes at the moment. So that is everything that I was going to talk about ahead of the Australian Grand Prix this weekend. Not particularly long episode or anything like that, but just a few bits of information ahead of the weekend, and most importantly, the timings. It's going to be rough, but it's going to be all right. We've got this. So do enjoy this race weekend. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do let me know. Like, rate, comment, subscribe. Share the podcast. I would really, really appreciate it. Come and join me over on the Pitboards and Podiums TikTok. We are still growing over there, and honestly, I'm loving it so much, and I really, really can't wait to really put so much energy into that. And yeah, I really appreciate you for listening or watching to this now, and I will see you again very, very soon. Obviously, with the recap for this weekend at the start of next week, and with those driver profiles that I keep talking about that I just haven't got around to editing yet. So they will also be up very soon for you. I will see you very, very soon. And yeah, I appreciate you listening. Thank you very, very much once more. Yeah, bye.